myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters, the Retro Show with me, Steve Wraith, and as always, I'm joined by George, by Mitch, by Stu, and Steve. Good evening, lads.
Hi, Stevie.
Hello.
Good to see you all. And this week, we thought, after covering Sunderland last week, who do we cover next? And I thought, let's go for Middlesbrough. So there it is, the old Ayresome Park, in all its glory. And George, as always, we'll come to you first. Memories of games against Middlesbrough.
Well, interestingly, Steve, the first thing, if you do a bit of looking, is how many games we've had against Middlesbrough, with Middlesbrough, that means something to them, or means something to us, or means something to both of us. And it's one of the biggest away games I went to was 1990, when both of us needed something out of the championship result. They to stay up and us to go up. And it turned out to be an absolute disaster for us. But the whole weekend was a bit of a disaster for me, and I'll tell you why. My father's older sister, Harriet, lived in Billingham. Her husband had got a house off the shipyard where he worked, and they went to move to Billingham. And my cousin, Margaret, worked and was a teacher in Billingham Technical College, and she had a link into the Boro, and she used to get tickets for Middlesbrough easy. And sometimes I'd go through and go to a match. But this time, I particularly said, if you can get tickets, we'll go. So she said, well, bring Marjorie, and me and Marjorie go to the shops and you can take Trevor to the match. Now, Trevor was her husband, and no sport in Trevor at all. In fact, Trevor's sport was to go to the Thai massage parlour in Middlesbrough and get some maybe to walk down his middle of his back. That was his sport. That was what he enjoyed.
George, do I need to say allegedly there?
No.
You're a good lawyer, Steve.
He's a very prominent lawyer in Teesside. I'm happy to defend myself. He's a good lawyer, and so much so that although I sat on the bench in North Tyneside, which is 60, 70 miles away, when I mentioned his name in our court, the clerks used to go, "Oh, him. You know him. Don't just know him. I'm related to him, through marriage." Anyway, Trevor would come with me to the match. Hadn't a clue. So throughout the match, every time the crowd made a move, and he bought himself a red and white scarf, by the way, and we went into the whole gate end of all places. And every time the crowd moved or there was something happening on the pitch, "What's happening, George? What's happening? What's happening?" And the number of times I'd say, "Well, just you see." Anyway, I had that throughout the game, and sadly, it was a miserable game. Even Mickey Quinn was right off because he had 2 or 3 chances. He toe poked them wide, toe poked one up into the whole gate end, and it didn't look like we're ever going to score. And then lo and behold, who should let we're down but one of our stalwarts, Stan Anderson. Stan Anderson attempted a headed back pass to Budgie.
John Anderson.
Yes, John Anderson attempted a back pass to Budgie, and who should it go to but Bernie Slaven, and that was the start of the debacle. And after that, Baird scored a couple. We got what you could call, some people would call a compensation goal or whatever to offset.
It was a consolation goal from Owen McGee scored the goal.
It was Kevin Brock.
Kevin Brock? It was an own goal, though. It was marked as an own goal, I think.
That's right. It got such a bad deflection. It went net without the goalkeeper getting near. And then, of course, straight after, just before the final whistle, Bernie Slaven topped it off with his second goal. So Baird got 2 and Bernie Slaven got 2. It was an absolute miserable game as far as I was concerned. And of course, I'd had to put up with this idiot beside me saying, what's happening all the time, which didn't leave us in a good frame of mind anyway. And of course, the 4-1 scoreline meant that they stayed up and we didn't go up. So, and as I say, that's one of the not one of these games where one or other of us needs something to happen, and there's quite a few of them, and this is one of them. So that was a weekend I remember, as you can gather, slightly ingrained on my mind, and going back to my aunt, to Harriet, to ask what was it like, and asking Trevor, did he enjoy it? He hadn't a bloody clue, and he said it was smashing, it was great. He hadn't a clue. I don't think he even knew where he'd been, perfectly honest. And then just before I went home, my Aunt Harriet took us to one side and said, he didn't take you to that place in Teesside, did he? I says, no, Harriet, he didn't. We're all right. You know, everything's okay. That was. There's one of my memories of Middlesbrough, and one of the first big away games I went to at Middlesbrough, and as I say, it stuck. But the other things that we've got with Middlesbrough is, of course, their record crowd was against us in 1949, 53,500. Surprising, because the team had Hardwick, Mannion, 2 or 3 regular England players, but they'd also bought somebody from us for the first 5-figure transfer fee, Andy Donaldson. So no wonder there was a big crowd. So that's my first memory anyway. I've got another one from a home game and something less important from a youth game with Middlesbrough. But that's my start for you anyway.
George, I want to ask you about the Texaco Trophy games, because I'm too young for those. I just missed out on them. I was born in 72. My first game was in 83, so I never saw them. But obviously, I've got the programs in the house: Anglo-Scottish tournaments, Texaco Trophy tournaments, and I believe Newcastle United used to win these things.
Well, they won that particular one, I think. Yes, but they were a bit of a shambles because neither of the teams played their first teams. It was like watching 2 reserve games, as far as I can remember. And it was only when they got to the semi-final and near the final that they started to play the first teamers. The rest of the thing, it was like a second team competition. And frankly, I think that's what killed it, Steve, is that Texaco people realised that they weren't getting value for what they were putting into it. You know, they weren't seeing the real Newcastle or the real Middlesbrough or whatever. But they were fairly, my memory is, they were fairly ordinary games because the teams that they were putting out were fairly ordinary teams.
Okay, that's good stuff. Mitch, your first memory of Middlesbrough.
First memory of Middlesbrough is lying on the floor of a coach while the windows are coming in. Pretty much. I've actually got 3 very distinct sort of different experiences of going to Middlesbrough. There's that one in me early teens, late teens, where going to Ayson Park on a coach was horrible. It was a horrible experience. One we rode in, grass banks either side. I think Teesside Police used to hand the bricks to the fans to throw because they never used to stop it. That's for sure. And you took your life in your hands getting there. Then when they moved to the Riverside, it was a different experience, very different experience. Would go there usually on the train, drop down to Darlington and meet Emma and the Stockton and Darlington mags down there. Usually in Hogan's, the pub outside of Darlington, which is fantastic. It makes the bar in Moss Isley Cantina look quite normal, to be fair. It's great when you're being served with somebody by a tusk and a flipper. And then you get the train from Darlington into Middlesbrough from there, and you'd be sort of like shuffled in by the police, and that was a different experience because you weren't getting off in Middlesbrough town centre. You were getting off a couple of stops after that, and it was pretty straightforward. Certainly a very different experience to going on the coach to Ayson Park. And then I worked on Teesside for about 4 or 5 years. And my boss down there was a Boro season ticket holder. And he used to take me to the games. He had 4 or 5 tickets. And actually I had a couple of games in the boxes there because of courtesy of him. where thankfully we had quite a good record. I don't think I ever saw we'll lose there while I was with him. And I was done under instructions to keep my gob shut and sit in my hands, and that was pretty much what I did. The only time I think anything ever escaped was when I think it was Emery hit a free kick and it cannoned off the bar, and I went, whoo! And that escaped out. But other than that, it was that was a different experience. Having experience going into boxes at St James's, boxes even at Roker Park and Sunderland Light, in the Stadium of Light, and then going to the Riverside. I have to say the experience in the Riverside boxes was far better, and the food was far better, and the hospitality was far better. So yeah, I've got sort of like 3 distinct phases of going to Middlesbrough, but my earliest one, like I say, was being about 15, 16, lying on the floor of a coach while all the windows came in and wondering what the hell am I doing here. That was a very, very different experience.
Stu, brace yourselves. I'm sure he'll have a wild story from Middlesbrough. It's not too far away, so here we go. Brace yourself, viewers.
I've got a couple, but I'll save them. The question was earlier was about the first experience of Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
And I've got a rant to come on, not a hasty-esque rant, but a rant of sorts. But before that, I just want to ask George when his trip to opticians is. Because to bid that much money for a T-shirt with these 3 ugly people on it, you definitely need your eye tested. But no, joking aside, magnificent gesture.
Short answer, Stuart, is what anybody here couldn't see was standing behind me with a big axe. Was we went to get that T-shirt, or you don't come off that bloody computer.
Yeah, big thank you, George. £150 was your winning bid, and you're a proud owner of that T-shirt now, and that money's gone direct. I know from you straight to the food bank. So massive thank you for that. Well, we'll have another competition starting on Friday, going over the weekend for another T-shirt from the guys at qtechshop.co.uk, of course, who've been a very loyal sponsor since day one. They make pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend. Got to give a shout out whilst I am to Darren Baldwin Funerals for paying for StreamYard, a local independent family business 24-hour service. Yeah, go on, Stu. Thanks, mate.
Right, the first game was, I remember going to, was the not too good season of 88-89. Where we actually beat Middlesbrough 3-0 and Mirandina scored twice. And the much maligned John Robertson from Hearts. Now, this is aimed at Mr. Hasty because he's always making fun of him being homesick, John Robertson. And as some of you will know, my family's from Edinburgh, and the big Hearts fan. So when I was younger than that, I used to go to the Hearts games, Newcastle 1 week, Hearts the next. And John Robertson's a proper legend at Tynecastle. So when he came to Newcastle, I was really excited, I'm thinking, right. And I knew he was a good player. He was small but nippy, quick off the mark, great natural finisher. And it never clicked. And it was his wife that was homesick. It wasn't him that was homesick. It was his wife that was homesick. But he was in a forward 3 with Mirandina and John Hendry. And I think the tallest out of the 3 of them was 5'7" or something. So in true Newcastle style, they bought Dave Besant to go and goal. And only from Wimbledon, he just won the cup that year. Well, Wimbledon had the FA Cup. And he would just put the ball forward as high as he could. And then look totally bemused when it come back because the front three would never win in these headers. So something had to give. But the first was Middlesbrough. We'll beat them 3-0. But the game I remember most from, like, say, my teenage years was is now the East Stand, but we used to call it the New Stand because where the Melbourne stand was the old stand, wasn't it? So I managed to get tickets. The first time I'd sat, the second time. First time was my very first game. The first time I sat by myself without my dad there in a Newcastle game, and I went with a couple of lads, and we sat in the far end of the East Stand. It used to hang over towards the Leazes end, and that's where the Middlesbrough fans were all penned in. And that was the game we drew 2-2. And of course, naturally, Mr. Slavens notched one. I think at least one of them But this is where I was 14, 15 at the time, and it was the first time I'd encountered real hatred at a football match, apart from like a hard Saints game, you know. But it was at Newcastle. It was surprising. It was always boisterous and big crack and all that, but it was real hatred. And I'm looking at these, like, to me they were gadgets, you know, like they were proper men, like leaning over and shouting all these profanities at the Middlesbrough fans. And I'm sure we're all old enough to recall at the time there was a advert on the TV for Fudge, and it was the song. Apologies for my singing and my melody, but it was a finger of fudge is just enough to give your kids a treat. So these fans were constantly singing, a finger and a thumb is just enough to give your kids a treat, because they've been the Teesside sex scandal at the time as well. So much to say, this wasn't going down too well with the Boro fans. And for about 30 minutes, it was just constantly barricade abuse at each other, but you could see them like spitting the foam out. And I was actually fascinated by it, you know. And I think that was my first taste of real. Well, it wasn't hooliganism at the time, but it was the first bit of, whoa, this could get a bit tasty. And if the two fans could have met each other, trust me, it would have went off big time. So that was my first experience of Middlesbrough. But I've got another game that I'm sure that's famous with everyone to talk about later on. So I'll pass it on to Mr. Steve H.
Okay, Steve Hasty.
You know what, guys? When I was a kid, they were never on my radar, Boro, because like from 64 to 74, they weren't in the same league as us. You know, they were a team, and I think the first time I came across them was actually the Texaco Cup. We beat them 4-0 in 1974 in the Texaco Cup. There was only about 11,500 there, and I remember thinking, you know, this is just going to be a walkover because they're basically an amateur team. You know, I mean, you know, you literally knew nothing about them. So they've always been an incidental club for me. You know, always incidental. And of course, by the time we got to the mid '80s, when they went bust, you know, and that's how bad things became, and that's how sort of disinterested I was in Boro, to be perfectly honest. But I must admit, I've always had a soft spot for Steve Gibson. Simply because of the way that he sort of came to the fore as a local businessman, fairly young at the time with a young family, but he took the club under its wing, and basically it's his club. He's built that club and he's still pumping money into it now, like since '86, I think it was when he started right the way through. But when you think they were a lockout club, you know, they were completely locked out, the doors were bolted, and I think they had to play at Hartlepool, you know. But in terms of the game that always sticks in my memory with Boro is Tino's debut. You know, you can't get better than it. You know, and I know that the guys are going to want to talk about it at some point. I'm sure everybody's going to want to have their little bit on it. So I'm going to leave it at that, so we can talk about that later on in the show. I'm sure, because it was, you know, we're probably all five of us are going to be sort of untwisting that knot that Neil Cox is still in, because he's.
Do you know what, Steve? You've hit the nail on the head there, though, about not being on the radar. And I'll give you my theory on this about Middlesbrough and about why we're more important to them than they seem to be to us. And it's about identity. And I think I got that when I worked down there. In that they've been in Durham. They've been in North Yorkshire. They're now in this Teesside made-up area. Yeah. If you go where I worked, I worked in Middlesbrough Town Centre, but I also worked in Eaglescliffe, and I worked in Yarm, and I worked in Gisborough. And if you talk to the guys in Eaglescliffe and Yarm and Gisborough, they'll tell you they're from North Yorkshire. They'll not tell you they're from anywhere else.
Yeah.
And they don't want to associate with the town in Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
So you ask them, who's your team? And half of them will tell you Middlesbrough, and half of them will tell you Leeds. You know, where I worked in Eaglescliffe, the pub over the road was called the Sportsman, and the sign outside the Sportsman had a Boro player on it. But if you went 500 yards down the road to the next pub, that had a Leeds player outside of it.
Yeah.
And they've got this sort of queer inability to identify. We're effectively a derby based on a television region. Tiny T's.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
where it came from.
What a great
For me.
analogy! What a great analogy that is.
You know, and it's really, really difficult for me to get worked up about them and feel that they're a rivalry. Even when I worked down there, it was like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you're not the Mackhams. It's not my problem. And they get more worked up about us than they do about the Mackhams even.
Yeah.
And I can't get my head around it. Because frankly, their derby should be Leeds. End.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
because so many of them from that region tell me they're from North Yorkshire. They don't tell us they're from Teesside or Cleveland or whatever else, you know. And it's a bit of a mess for them, and more important to them to have an identity. And I think that's why we're the target, because we're regionally based on the television region. We're the big boys.
Yeah, exactly.
So we become more important to them than they are to us. And it's strange. I found it strange working down there that, you know, you get outside of Middlesbrough and you get into Eaglescliffe, Yarm and the surrounding area, and the apathy towards Middlesbrough is a place, and the apathy towards Middlesbrough as a football club is quite staggering.
Yeah.
And then you get further out towards Darlington, you'll find if we go for a pint in Hogan's outside of Darlington train station, I guarantee there's more Geordies in there than there is anybody else.
Yeah, it's true. Very, very true. Is that something you agree with, George?
I do, yes. And it's interesting because obviously my links with shipyards, having done consultancy work with shipyards on the Tees as well as the Tyne and other places. When you talk to people in shipyards on Teesside, they didn't talk about being Middlesbrough. They talked about being South Bank or Billingham. They never talked about Middlesbrough. And I think that's part of what was talked about. They just didn't have that identity. I've got to say this, that my lawyer relative who through marriage, another one of his favourite sports was to sit in his office and listen to the
Thai boxing.
78 recordings of Adolf Hitler, and he's in the German military music.
My God, we're getting some revelation. We're getting some revelation.
He was definitely a complicated young man. There's no doubt about that. But apparently, a very clever lawyer.
Complicated.
You're right.
As I say, the lads from Teesside at the shipyard always talk about either South Bank or Billingham, never Middlesbrough as the place to do what they do. I mean, we did with a colleague of mine. We did a floating harbour for the Falklands during the Falklands War to save the ships having to offload in open water, and it was all built in Teesside. Actually, the ITM was closer to Middlesbrough than it was anything else, but it was always Teesside or Billingham had got the mention. Never Middlesbrough got out of it. And actually, that was built there, and it's still working today. If you want to go on Twitter, on Google, and have a look at the Flexiport in Port Stanley Harbour. We worked on that in Teesside for ages, but nobody ever said, admitted that we were going to Middlesbrough. It was always going to either South Bank or Billingham.
Brilliant stuff. Any other games you want to look back at, George?
Well, can I mention a youth game, because it has
go on.
The outcome of this youth game was a peculiar one for one Newcastle player. We're playing Middlesbrough in the Northern Intermediate League. Now I'm talking about 1957-ish. Yeah, 57, 58. So, and it was a mixed team we had. We had 15, 16-year-olds like myself, and George Dalton's the name you'll recall. Joe Butler, another name you'll recall from our first team. And to boast of the younger ones, they brought back a couple of the Youth Cup winners, Kenny Hale, Jackie Bell, who both played a lot in our first team, and Billy Thompson at centre-half, just to boast of all these youngsters. And at centre forward, we had a lad called Carl Wilson from Delves Lane Juniors, Neil.
Ahoy!
Delves Lane Juniors. Magnificent figure of lad. Even he was a little bit older than us. He was about 17, but he was 6'2" tall and 6'2" wide. And he had muscles where, you know, people in those days didn't have muscles. His father was an ex-pro of mine, and I sometimes wonder if he didn't find steroids before they were invented, but never mind. Carl was sent forward, but the man that rang the ends then, Ted Hughes, I don't know if that's a name any of you remember. Ted Hughes, Joe McCarthy used to run the ends, and Ted Hughes was the headmaster of St. Aloysius High School, grammar school, and sometimes used to behave like a head teacher. Well, Carl and Ted didn't get on. Well, we were winning, I think it was 2-1, and Carl made a mistake in the centre circle, and Hughes' voice came right across the pitch, tearing a strip off Carl Wilson, and want to see you doing something special, Carl. Come on, sort yourself out. And so the next time Carl Wilson got the ball, he was just in our half, the centre circle, in his own half, and he turned and he walloped this ball from that spot right into the top corner of the net. The only trouble was it was our net.
Oh.
He sent it the other way and made the score 2-2. Well, you know, Hughes' face, he just erupted. The end of the match, everybody thought, oh, that's Carl finished. He's done. That's it. And it was big row. You could hear it in the dressing room next door to where we were with Hughes, Carl and his father and all the rest of it. And they all disappeared away in a car down to St. James's Park. And we all imagined being taken to see Charlie Minton, who was the manager then, to pack him off, to sack him. Well, a couple of weeks later, he comes out in the first team at centre forward in our first team, in Newcastle first team. He only played the one match, but at least he got into the first team. But about 3 weeks later, he was playing for Gateshead. So, and that was another Middlesbrough match, which, for obvious reasons, had special moments for me.
Yeah, that's brilliant, George. Neil, your next story, mate.
I tell you what, I found a really strange game was the one where we had the game where Mido scored. And
yes.
We launched, obviously, a few chants towards him. And the fallout from that was quite bizarre. Because basically, throughout that game, there was chants about all sorts. But they picked on those particular ones. You know, there was chants about
anybody who doesn't know the story, the best way to describe it is that Mido had a slight resemblance, shall we say, to somebody who'd been charged, tried, and found guilty of terrorism. That's probably the best way to put it.
And there was two chants about Mido has got a bomb, you know, and the other one was shoo bomber, which was there was a kids program called Shoe People at the time, and that was the similar kind of tune. But I mean, there was chants that day about Roy Keane and dogs, and there was chants that day about stuff to shoot. Mentioned about that, you know, always comes up with Tayside, you know, and it was like that was just all other look to concentrate on that one thing, and that whole atmosphere of that game was weird after that point, because it was almost like everybody knew, oh shit, this is going to get talked about, this is going to get blown open, and it's going to be used, and it was used by certain parts of the press, and I remember. And I remember at the time doing interviews because I was either doing the Journal Jury or the Punters Panel in the Chronicle, one or the other at the time, and I was asked to give an opinion on it. And let's just say even the reporting was selective in the opinions they gave. You can't. It's very difficult to defend it, but equally, when you've been in the middle of a football crowd. And you get this sort of experience where certain things are made, certain chants are made, and a crowd runs with it. there's just no leeway made for football fans. We're treated it's so different. We're treated so different. You know, this game turns us into strange beasts.
Yeah.
You know, I think I probably mentioned before on some of the shows, my missus used to have, when I first met my miss, she had this red leather settee she'd bought from Barter and Stonehouse, and it was a pride and joy.
Yeah.
And I come in one night from work and she put white cushions on it, and I utterly refused to sit on it. And she thought I was off my tits.
I'm like that in the house, mate.
3.5 months of sitting on the floor finally persuaded her to change the cushions on the settee.
Wow, that's commitment.
And that's what this game does to it, you know. And you'll run with something, you'll do something, because that's the way we are. And you, what still frustrates me about that game was the absolute stick we got as a fan base about the chant. And it wasn't, and I can say that as somebody who lives in the Middle East, it wasn't an Islamophobic chant. It wasn't meant as anything other than the fact he looked like the bloke who had a bomb in his shoe on the plane, because he did. It was at best look-alikeist,
yeah,
if anything, and it was super frustrating to have to try and defend that. Yeah. And it was one of the first sort of instances where you think, okay, we're being called to account here, and yeah, sometimes perhaps football crowds should be called to account. But maybe that was just over the top.
Yeah,
just over the top.
Yeah,
and I think we got a really harsh ride off of Louise Taylor in particular, if I remember.
Yeah.
And she was quite selective in the people she interviewed after the match, both Newcastle and Middlesbrough fans, who were quite happy to criticise the fan base and go on whatever personal agenda they had.
Yeah, there was a big thing about us all wearing masks as well, wasn't there? We went down there.
I remember. Well, do you not remember when we got banned? I think it was around 2002, 2003. They actually said they were going to ban chemical masks and chemical suits from the ground. And I remember
welcome us with open arms under the current situation.
I remember being there in the late 80s, early 90s, when the whole Alternate and all of those bands were doing the rounds. I remember being there in a chemical mask and a chemical suit and giving it large, you know. We all were. Yeah. Stu probably remembers that as well. It was part of it. But then it got to the point where I think in the early 2000s, I think it just did get a little bit extreme. I think there were people turning up there with surplus stuff from Chernobyl, you know. It did get a little bit extra. And I remember that actually said, if you turn up in this, we're going to ban you. We're going to chuck you out.
Yeah, they did.
But yet, I also remember driving to work around about the same time, going over the flyover that takes you over the A19, looking to my left and seeing nothing but a green haze. That's not made up. That's true. That's absolutely true. Because I worked there for 5 years. I know exactly what it's like. You know, and it did get a little bit tense, I think is the word.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Good stuff, good memories. Stu?
Right, I'm going to have to talk about two games. One leads on to the other. The second one is the one that's probably the more famous. It's the League Cup 92-93, the home and away leg. Now, I was 18 at the time. I'd just come back from Estonia with Darren, who the lads know, and on a coach trip. You know, when that was fashionable in the early 90s, you'd get a coach to Spain, 2 days on a coach, one toilet, stinking of, you know what, all the way there and all the way back. Well, we'd just come back from that 18-year-old thinking that we're men and we knew the world. And it was late September, the first game. And there was actually frost on the ground. And I remember it was really, well, obviously chilly because we just come back from Spain, you know, we were like international jet setters now, even though we went by coach. And when I was researching it, what I didn't realise at the time was that was Rob Lee's debut for Newcastle. And, you know, he turned out all right, that fella. But I remember when he was playing and he got taken off, and it was like, oh, I'm not too sure about this Cockney fella, like, you know, and you know, because we all had our own favourites, you know, and when we were away on the holiday, well, it ended up being a 3 week, but it was 2 weeks at the hotel. That was the season where we won every single game at the start of the season. I think we went 10 or 11 games and we won every single game.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're good to beat. It was Grimsby that stopped the run, I remember.
Yeah.
But we're good to beat.
The goal scorer was Dobbin, of all people.
So the way it was, we're going to beat Middlesbrough. They were a league above us. We're definitely going to beat them. And it was quite a tepid 0-0 for what was meant to be a derby game. So after that, I says, right, we'll go. I wanted to go to the away leg down at the old Ayresome Park. Darren couldn't make it, but if you remember the old blue buses that used to run around Newcastle, you know, they were always in the concourse, the blue buses. Well, I used to play a five-a-side, as I mentioned last time, at Dunstan and Sunderland, but also at Wallsend on a Sunday morning, Wallsend Sports Club. And it was the blue bus that took us there, and I was playing football for them because my younger brother used to sit in the buses all the time. So if you ever got a bus from the city centre to Kingston Park or up to the airport, you would have seen my younger brother, not as attractive as me, like, but you would have seen him sitting on the bus all the time. So through that, I was asked to play for Blue Bus at Wallsend. So I was like looking for someone who I could go with to this away game at Middlesbrough, thinking, well, we drew, but at least we'll get to see a top league team and stuff like that and see how good we actually are. Because I think, well, at that time, even late September, well, this game's now in October, we all knew that we were going to get promoted, or we felt it. We sensed that we were going to get promoted that season. You know, Keegan fever had taken over. It ended up being one of the lads I played football with, a guy from South Shields by the name of Stevie Buglis, who's unfortunately passed away since. But his backstory, apart from being a bus driver, was he was in the Paras and he used to claim he was in the SAS. So he used to get ribbed for it. We used to say he was a dog trainer or a dog handler in the SAS and stuff like that. But, you know, he was a handy guy. Then we went down, he arranged for one of the other bus drivers, a Dutch guy called Jan, to drive us down in his car. And he had a Rover, you know, big posh car at the time. He had a Rover, and there was me, my younger brother, and one of his friends, a lad called Warren. And they were, so if I was 18, they would have been 16-year-old with this ex-para thinks he's the hardest man in the whole of South Tyneside and drives a bus, this, that, and the other. So we get there, and I don't know if any of us were at that game. It was probably, even now, probably one of the most hostile away games I've ever been to.
Yep.
And I was
that was the game I was lying on the floor of the coach for, mate. Aye.
Yeah. Well, you said you were 60. You would have been 35 then, Mitch.
Give over.
So anyway, Jan's drove down, and he's parked the car, and obviously the bus drivers know where they're going and stuff like that, and navigation-wise. But I actually was good at geography, hence the reason I ended up in Bahrain. But he parked the car about 6 streets away, and it was quite nice, and off we wandered into the ground. And for those who have seen the film ID, it was very much like that, with like pool balls, darts, any bits of concrete getting knocked over the fence that was split between us. You know, and there was people around you getting their heads split and everything else. And there was very generous chants going backwards and forwards about looking after the children when people weren't watching and stuff. And as the game went on, we ended up winning 3-1. And if I remember right, Mickey Quinn wasn't playing that game. He didn't start anyway. Quinn wasn't in the starting 11. And I'm sure you could only have 2 subs or something at the time. Mm-hmm. So again, as Geordie gossip is going, Keegan's thrown the game already. We haven't got McQuinn starting. And, you know, he's got that Rob Lee playing again. And so it was Peacock and Dave Kelly. We beat them 3-1. Fantastic football. And when we were leaving, we come out the away end and we got kept behind, as it used to be the away fans got kept behind. And all that did is allow them to round up and gather the forces together, you know. And so anyway, we walked out. Now, the rest of the away fans were turning right as they come out towards the train station where the coaches were parked. We had to turn left because Jan, the Dutch navigator, decided to park the car. So we're walking up, 5 of us, walking up the back of the stand. Middlesbrough fans that were in that stand walking against us. Thankfully, none of us had colours on. And we're walking up, there was a police cordon at the top of the road. And I'm standing next to this Stevie Bugless who, you know, he'll fight the world and proper army boy, you know, drink pints of sick and stuff like that. And he grabbed the hold of the arm and he went, "Don't run, son. We're Geordies. These colours don't run," and all that. And I'm 18 and I'm getting a bit twitchy here. And I'm thinking, well, Steve, you know, I'm not going to have you telling me I'm not running that I ran. So, right, off we go. The police will do the job. I just had in my head, the police will do the job. And again, it was the Middlesbrough fans' faces. You could see the I don't know if I can't even call it hatred. It was just the anger they had towards Newcastle. Maybe it was because they didn't have salt and vinegar for the chips on the shoulders or something like that. But they really did have, and we just beat them 3-1, I suppose, which didn't help. But they were, "How we're going to kill you, you're Geordie this and Geordie that." So we're all standing there, "Go on, easy, this is easy, this, but the police are going to do the job." And we're about 30 metres away from them. And eventually 1 or 2 started breaking through the ranks. And thankfully there was more forward-thinking Newcastle supporters in front of me who decided that's as far as they could walk. But then there was a big surge and loads of them come through. And I went, I said, "Stevie, what's happening?" You said, "Don't run." And I'm looking at this Middlesbrough fan who, for some reason, made eye contact with us, and he was pointing me out, and he was basically going to treat me like I was in an American jail. All these things he was going to do to us. And I'm looking at him, "Yeah, of course you will, mate. I've got Stevie Bugless next to me." So when Stevie, they're getting a bit close, like, and this guy just started running at us. And I'm thinking within 2 or 3 seconds, like, so I turned around and went, "Stevie, you're going to hit him." And he wasn't there. He'd legged it. So I was basically the only Newcastle fan standing there within about 20 yards of like all these Middlesbrough fans running through. And I know I'm shaped that way now, but I used to be shaped like that. And boy, I learned I could run that night. Like, I got to the bottom end of that street before Stevie Bugless did. He must have had a 30-metre head start on us. I was away. But as it happened, we ended up, because we didn't know where we were. Behind the Oldgate end, there was a park, if I remember rightly. And it was very dimly lit, and there was trees, obviously trees in the park and everything else. And you're walking through, and there was all this bother. It was going on. There was just fights everywhere. There was people getting lamped all over the place. And you started thinking, it's only a matter of time like, before this could be my last night on the earth. And from someone who beat the Spain a couple of weeks before, thinking I'm a man, I realised I had a couple of years to grow up yet, you know, before I could actually call myself a man. And without mobile phones and without sat-nav, this, that, you know, by the good grace of God, we managed to find Jan sitting in the car with his flask waiting for us. And where have you two idiots been?
Flask.
You know, for a cold night when we're sweating, just drive, will you? And we got home quick enough. So that was, again, another long story, but my first proper experience of visual football violence. And there's a few more that will come in short weeks ahead. But that was the first one.
Absolutely brilliant, that, mate. Steve Hasty, follow that.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I mean, 2 things. The first one being that was Rob Lee returning to Middlesbrough, where he thought he was actually signing for, or the club he thought he was signing for, till Keegan nipped in and told him that Newcastle was nearer to London than Middlesbrough, if I remember rightly. Then that game that you're talking about, Stu, was the game that my pal Mick learned to drive a furniture van, because they'd all gone down in the furniture van, parked up on a bit of waste ground, well, which could have been anywhere in Middlesbrough, I suppose, if the truth be known. And went to the game, and as they all dashed off to get into a pub, they left the lad who was driving. I'll not name him, but he got a bit of a kicking. So they couldn't understand where he was. It wasn't until they got back to the van that they realised that he was missing. And the van was surrounded by coppers. So he went over, and the copper just said, like, you're going to have to shift this van. And they said, well, waiting for the driver. And they said, well, you'll wait a long time. He's in hospital. And they said, what happened? They said, well, never mind what happened. They just want you off for a patch. So they lined them all up, and they'd all been drinking, and they just said, can anybody drive? And the coach just said, yeah, I can drive. And he said, right, well, get in behind the wheel and drive off. And he said, no way, because you'll do us drink driving. And he said, son, he goes, there's mayhem in the city centre. We just want you off our patch. Just get in that van and drive. And he says, convinced the minute I sat in that seat they were going to lift us, because that's sort of the word down there. He just, but no, they're sure enough, they let him down. He had to drive home with about 4 or 5 pensions and about 20 people in the back of a furniture van, you know. So, getting back to Boro, I mean, Boro was the only team that the Cheer actually managed to scrape 3 points off, believe it or not, in his 8-game managerial situation with Newcastle. And I think if Neil will verify this, that was one of the 3 games, Neil, that we got contacted by Derek Lambay asking us to try and create some atmosphere in the ground.
Yep.
When we were part of NUST or NUSC as it was then. The first one was the Chelsea game where we did the balloon launch. Second one, Boro, and then the third one was the infamous. You've had all your free scarves. I'm not giving you any more.
You've had your scarves. You come back. Aye.
It was a great game. That
played Fulham, you know. So but that was typical, wasn't it? I don't think we've played them competitively since 2010, have we?
No. I mean it's been a long time since we faced them, and that's literally because they've been in different divisions. Newcastle, and when they have briefly flirted with the Premier League, they've gone up and then come back down. So
can I just mention? Sorry, the game that Steve mentioned there was with the scarves. That was when we beat them 3-1, wasn't it? But we still got relegated.
That's right.
Lambay thought the job was done.
Yeah.
Now, at the time I was living in Tenerife, and JC was at the time in Toronto. John Carver was in Toronto, and we had a mutual friend, Jimmy Suggett, who worked with me in Tenerife. He was in Thailand, so it was the 3 teams: Thailand, Tenerife, Toronto, and we all met back for that game, and we're in the Black Bull. And I'm once again smoking. I'm outside for a cigarette, and all the Boro boys have come off the bus, and it was the police at the time had just caught on with video cameras. And I ran in the bar and I was like, yeah, lads, come up, watch this kickoff outside here. So if they come out and John Carver's standing there and the camera's smoking around right on him. I've never seen him move so fast back into the bar, you know, because I don't want to be on TV. I should be seen on the television and stuff like that, you know. And he's legged it in. But the atmosphere of that game was absolutely amazing. And I come over for a week. And the next game, that was on a Monday night. I'm sure it was on a Monday night, that Middlesbrough game, we won 3-1. And then we played Fulham at home on the Saturday and got beat 1-0, which I'm sure, was it Viduka? Did Viduka play for them? I've got a feeling Viduka, he played for us at the time. But we got beat 1-0 off Fulham, and from the euphoria of the 3-1.
Yeah, Viduka was playing for us. Viduka was playing for us because in that Fulham game, Viduka had a goal which went over the line.
Right. I knew you had forgotten it.
Yeah.
And it was like from the euphoria of beating Boro 3-1, we're going to steal, to how flat it was 5 days later. And I know you lads have got the story with the scarves and stuff like that, and they didn't want to replace them, did they?
That's right.
So,
amazing.
Just again, you've got to spend money to make money, haven't you?
Yeah.
I remember Lambias come back to it, and he was one of the first times I've ever seen him not buoyant about anything. He was such a weird character, and he was so almost Teflon, nothing stuck on him. And he really didn't give a monkeys about so much. But that had, because he was like, I've been told we can't buy anymore because you've had them, you'll bring them back. And we're like,
of course I do.
No, that's not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. He just sort of shrugged his shoulders almost to say, like, yeah, I know. It was super frustrating because we'd finally got him to listen. The penny had dropped with him about 3 or 4 weeks before. I think Steve and I both remember the meeting we had with him, where we literally watched the light bulb come on above his head. Like, oh, yeah, he's got this. He's finally bloody got it. And it was just too much, too little, too late, you know?
Great atmosphere that day as well, wasn't it?
One thing I remember, we're coming towards the end of the show, Matt. We've got to get in our usual features. So things I just want to mention were the most infamous photo of this game has to be this one.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you seen the lad on Twitter who does the Sabutio figures, who's done a Sabutio version of that? It's fabulous.
Yeah, fantastic. Philip Albert, and of course one of Middlesbrough's greatest players, Janino, offering an opinion to Philip Albert, and Philip just laughing at him, and the late great Pavel Cernacek in the background there, of course. I dug up this one on the internet as well, of course. That game that we were all at, I was in the hook. I mentioned it last week, but the game that Stu was referencing earlier, I was actually on the Holgate end with my dad, because we couldn't get a ticket for the away end. We ended up on the home end for that. But there was a beanbag at St James's Park. And some old memories there of the Leazes end, as it was back in the day before that wonderful stand went up. Yeah.
Steve, the centre spot's still in George's back garden.
The centre spot's still in George's back garden. Brilliant.
That's true. In fact, I just bought it yesterday.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Great stuff. Basically, the only other thing that I wanted to mention was, of course, Middlesbrough. We say we haven't played them since 2010, but of course, at the start of the season, we did happen to play them in a friendly. Neil Warnock, of course, was managing Middlesbrough. Steve Bruce was, well, I won't say managing Newcastle. He was doing something. He was there. But yeah, we got whopped 5-1, and then of course the return fixture was called off for one reason or another. But that was the last meeting that we actually had with Middlesbrough. So every week we always have a couple of items, and I usually split them up through the show. But obviously the lads had so many great stories about Boro, I didn't want to interrupt them. So first of all, celebrity fans who support Middlesbrough. I'll give you an easy one first.
Oh, that's Mortimer.
Correct.
Bob Mortimer.
Bob Mortimer. You're right, lads. You're right. This guy shouldn't cause any problems.
Oh, that's Stephen Tompkinson.
Yes, Tom. Yeah.
Stephen Tompkinson, of course, who has played many parts on TV and is a big Boro fan.
Oh, that's him that won the X Factor, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, getting hot here, very warm.
Yeah. What's he called? I know him as he's just an X Factor winner, which makes him probably a loser.
I do know him. I forget his name.
Well, he's got two Christian names. Does that help?
No. James Arthur.
Correct. That was a good clue. Too good a clue. Right. Okay.
I know everyone knows I'm a secret X Factor fan.
Who on earth's that?
Who the hell is that?
Yep.
I knew I'd get you with this.
Is that a real picture or is it a drawing?
No, it's a real picture. It's
Molly something.
Big Middlesbrough fan.
It's like Spenny with a wig.
It's like Spenny with a wig.
Or without a wig.
It's not Spenny. Was that your guess? Okay.
Wow.
I've been a bit naughty really with this one. Would you like to see him without his female clothes on?
Aye.
Joe.
Never.
Oh.
Never.
Mark Benton.
Yes.
Yeah, another big Boro fan. I'm going to claim a victory on that one because you didn't get it with the first picture. Finally,
They never got it, Steve.
Finally.
Well, that's Chris Rea.
Oh, Steve, I knew you'd know that because he's. You've got photos of yourself looking like that.
Things longer than that.
You know what? I was going through Chris Rea photos trying to find one which would be really obscure, and it was either one where he was really young or one where he's looking quite old. And I thought that one would catch you. But well done, Steve. Yeah, that is Chris Rea. Obviously, just getting ready to drive home for Christmas there. Now, this was quite a hard one because, believe it or not, although there's an abundance of players who played for Newcastle and Sunderland, there wasn't many players who played for Newcastle and Middlesbrough. There's a few who've played for all three, but not many. Reckon? So this is, I found it difficult to find them, but obviously name. I've got 5 here. See if you can name these.
Shea Given.
Yeah.
John Craggs.
Correct. John Craggs, yeah.
That's
Alan Foggan.
Alan Foggan.
Stan
Anderson.
Stan Anderson for a full house, lads. Looking at the guy at the top.
That's not George, is it?
It's not George.
He hasn't got a Thai wife there, has he?
Charles McCall. Charles, one of the
Charlie
famous Charles brothers.
No, definitely not.
Nah, not a clue on that one.
This week.
Now, George, I'm going to come to you. I'm sure you might, if I give you a clue, you might get it. With your history and knowledge of Northeast football, he's got the same surname as one of our coaching staff.
Askew.
Oh, very close.
Yeah.
Agnew. I'll give you that. Agnew.
Yes,
Yes.
Agnew. Yes.
William Agnew.
William
that
Agnew.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
good stuff. Well done. We'll give you that. Clean sweep, lads. Well done. Well done. Time to pick your team, your combination team of Newcastle and Middlesbrough players and a manager. So Steve Hasty will come to you to go first tonight.
Thanks very much.
I thought you looked a bit pensive.
I did as well because I forgot all about this part of it.
Brilliant.
I was too busy writing down other players that you haven't mentioned who came to Boro. Can I just go through them?
Well, you could do, yeah, but as long as it's in 11 and you've got your manager.
Well, I have actually. Well, if I include...
Go last, Steve. Go last.
I'll give it a whirl if you like.
I don't mind going as first again there, Steve.
Go for it, George. Go for it.
Okay.
Let Steve get a chance to do that.
It's a 4-2-4, and are all players that played for both. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Craggs, Bohm, Woodgate, Natras is the back four. Stan Anderson, Gascoigne.
Wow, Gaza.
And Foggin is the mid. And the front two, Henry and Viduka. And I tossed up between Henry and Mills, but I ended up putting Henry in. And, subs, you could have Mills, Horsefield, Baird, Hurd, and the manager, Keegan.
Fantastic, George. What a team. I forgot about Gaza. Wow, unbelievable. Go on then, Mitch. I know, God, my mind must be frazzled with takeover talk with Liam.
Yeah, you see, for me, Boro was the place we sent defenders to die in the 1980s.
Ah, right.
The amount of defenders we sent there in the 80s when they were coming to the end of their careers, it was ridiculous. So you could probably have a back eight. But anyway, I'm going Given and goal, a back three of Mills, Woodgate, and Bohm. And then a midfield four of Natras, Brownlee, Dyer, and Jeremy. And then Gaza playing off of a front two of Viduka and Foggin.
Very
and
good.
The manager, Big Jack Charlton.
Yeah.
Big Jack, it's a game. Good stuff. Okay, Stu.
Well, I've got an admission to make because I messaged Mitch this afternoon. I said, have you picked a team for this show? And he went, no, I haven't got down to yet. I says, I'm struggling. I've got about 7 or 8. So Mitch rattled off about 6 players, and 3 of them I didn't have, so I put them in my team. But I'm into it. But the ones I did have, actually, to be fair, 2 of the players are probably the best players I've seen in their position for Newcastle. But we started off in goal with Shea Given, then had Irvin Natras at right back, Pat Hurd at left back, with John Craggs centre half next to John Woodgate, who I thought was probably the best centre half I've seen at Newcastle, Jonathan Woodgate. In midfield, so it was a 4-2-3-1. In midfield was Jeremy with Gaza. Again, Gaza being the other person who's probably one of the best players I've seen in that position, live, that is. The 3 was Henry, that's John Henry, Kieran Dyer, and Stan Anderson. And up front was Mark Viduka, who we mentioned earlier. And of course, Jackie Charlton was the manager. He managed both.
Brilliant, fantastic, Steve. I hope you've had enough time to compile your team and list. And
I've stuck Jack in as manager. I've gone Given, Craggs, Woodgate, Bohm, and Natras. And then in midfield, I've gone. So that's what 1, 2, 3, that's 2, 5. Midfield. My strikers, I've gone for Viduka and Foggin. And then my midfielder, Jeremy, Gaza, Hendry, and I'm gonna throw you a right curveball, Sammy Amiobi.
Wow.
Oh, yes.
Well done.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was actually. I had him. I only had a list of players who played, and I thought, Christ, I'll have to stick Sammy in. You know, he's pulling up trees in the championship at the minute, isn't he? You know, he's getting sports again. So I thought, you know, let's give Sammy a run out. He didn't get much of a run out for Newcastle, so I'll give him a run out for this.
Could stick Steve Harper in as goalkeeping coach as well, because he's done a spell down at Middlesbrough.
Right.
I hasn't he?
A couple of games that we didn't mention. I was going to mention that the game that nobody's remembered is 2009. For two reasons. It was in the championship. We had a goal by Amiobi and a goal by Marlon Harewood. But Harewood got replaced by a bloke that we keep forgetting who was such a superstar, Fabrice Pancrat. Do you remember him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Harewood. And I just thought, you know, two players that had so little influence on Newcastle United in a game and both replacing each other, because we hardly saw Marlon Harewood, but Fabrice Pancrat, whatever happened to him?
Yeah.
Did he go to Boro? No, he didn't go to Boro.
waiting on a table near you soon.
It could be,
Did he not go to Leicester?
I'm not sure where he went, to tell you the truth, Neil.
No, it's a mystery. It's a mystery, but I'm sure we'll solve it at some point on an NUFC Matters. The clock has beaten us, and as always on our show, we always have the big reveal for the Three Amigos flyer for this weekend. Are you ready, lads? We need a drum roll for this, don't we? We need some kind of sound effect. I thought it was quite a good one to have, especially with the takeover being back on and in full effect. And I thought, there we go, Braveheart. Yeah, freedom. It's freedom from Mike Ashley.
One for the battle ahead.
One for the battle ahead. Yeah. So the Three Amigos is on Friday, of course, 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock on Friday night. You can join me on
Neil, can you put it back on, please?
Oh, yeah. Join me on Thursday night for Super Mac and Gibbo. And we'll have to pass on our congratulations tonight to John Gibson, who's taken the step down the aisle and got married today. So
congratulations.
Congratulations, John.
See, I don't want to sound controversial, but you see Mitch there, does he not look like Samantha from the ladies' night?
Oh, well, we can ask Samantha for her opinion on that. And I'm sure
Samantha's more attractive, like, but there's a resemblance there.
Yeah, it's good. I've managed to score for the main part again. It's a pity my acting career's not like that, but never mind. George,
never mind, you're still Marjorie's star, Steve.
Oh, thank you, George. That's on me best.
Don't get over to know somebody in Vera. No, what I wanted to say, Steve, is that people have been very kind about me for the T-shirt, but I just want to say to everybody, I'm terribly conscious of how lucky I am to be in a position to be able to do that and to have somebody here at home that supported us at doing it as well. It was great fun, but as I say, I'm very privileged to be able to do that and don't mind doing it. But it wasn't hard with Marjorie here saying, well, let's go for it, you know. So
you need the set of three, George.
Grateful to everybody. Sorry?
You need the set of three.
I'm not going to tell her that. I'm glad she's upstairs in bed.
Brilliant. Lads, as always, absolute pleasure to have you on. And thank you very much, George, for that great donation towards the food bank. I'm sure that will go a long way.
Yeah.
And Friday night, we will be putting out another T-shirt again for the same cause. We've got 2 more to go, so hopefully we'll be able to make, be nice to make a nice figure for the food bank off the back of those 2. Big thank you to qtechshop.co.uk for sorting that out. Lads, look forward to seeing you two, Steve Hasty and Mitch, on Friday. Stu, George, catch you again for the Retro Show next week. Take care, lads. Good night.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.